Good morning. Go ahead, take out your Bible, turn to the book of Mark as we continue to walk through chapter by chapter, verse by verse through the Gospel of Mark. We're in chapter 6, starting in verse 7. And I would love to also invite you, if you don't have a Bible, the words will be on the screen, but we would love to give you a Bible. So in the lobby, there are stacks of Bibles on your way out. You can take one of those. That's our free gift to you. They are actual Bibles that you can walk around with, and it looks like you purchased it on purpose. And so they're not paperback or hardback, so don't feel weird grabbing one and then saying that's your Bible. It's not going to say Holy Bible on the front, any of those kinds of things. You can walk around with it. That's our gift to you. We want everybody to have God's Word, and so we can study it together. But we'll be in Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 7. And I'll be honest with you, this is not a hard text in the sense of, is it straightforward? Is it confusing? What are the different nuances theologically that we have to understand? This is a very straightforward text. But it's also a very difficult text because it's a challenge to each of our hearts. And this week, I've really been wrestling with just even some of the realities of this text and what Jesus calls his disciples to do, what he sends them out to do, as we'll see this morning. And I've just been wrestling just with the thought of even our city. And I was in Atlanta some this week and just meeting with a group of pastors, really reflecting and thinking through future of church planting and how do we come together to multiply and have every denomination and network planting churches that multiply for the sake of a city, of actually like trying to disciple a city and not just grow a church. And it made me just kind of really think and reflect personally on my own heart, but also the city that we live in. And just this deep reality of if Jesus, everything that we've been talking about in the book of Mark, if Jesus really did come, if Jesus really did live for us, if he lived the life that we couldn't live in the only way that he can, if he really did die to pay the penalty of our sin and our rebellion, if we really were created to have community with God and it really was restored through the work, life, death, resurrection of Jesus, and he really does by grace offer us salvation in him, with the understanding that it's completely by his work that we have salvation. It's completely by his work that we are saved. It's completely by his grace of placing our faith in the reality he's done everything that is required. And in so doing, he truly brings us back into community with him. He restores relationship with him, and we begin to understand the identity that we were created to actually have through who we are in him. The purpose that we were actually created to fulfill and to live in, that would bring joy, that would bring this kind of awe to life. With this understanding that when God actually created us and breathed life into us, that first exhale of breath was a form of worship to our Creator, and therefore everything that we did from that point forward was to give him worship and to give him honor and to give him praise and to reveal him is our purpose in every single thing that we do, and that our joy is actually intertwined in that community identity and in that purpose that he gives us to give glory to him in everything. If these things are true, and we could go on and on and on about the beautiful reality of the gospel truth. And I wish that maybe we could just spend our entire time together just talking about those things, because I'm so convinced, not only in my own life, but in the church's life, and as I meet with Christians and I meet with other pastors, I'm more and more increasingly convinced in our culture that we have all sorts of knowledge about the gospel truth, but when I talk about the beauty of it, just goes right over our heads. We have this real difficult problem with taking what we know and getting it down to our hearts and it transforming our lives and everything about what we do. We have such a hard time living in the joy of the reality of who we are in Jesus, of reflecting it in everything, of living, we would say, as revealers of the love and forgiveness and grace and mercy and beauty and justice that has come into our lives through Jesus Christ, setting us free from the things of the world and from our own desires and our own passions that always fall short, and living with him as king in his kingdom and knowing the sure hope of him coming and redeeming and making all things new. We have a hard time living that out in our daily lives. It's knowledge. But then we continue living our life like we're not revealers of who we are in Jesus, but we're seekers of life and the things he created. And this week, I've just been thinking and processing, man, if these things are true, and I know them to be, then how would that begin to look in my life? How would it begin to look in the daily rhythms and routines of my life? What would it look like if I truly believed that and I was being transformed by that, and the beauty of that reality, of that restoration that I have in Christ just began to be revealed in everything that I did? It was the lens in which I saw my work and my relationships and my marriage and my parenting and my friends and school and whatever it is that I'm doing, the coffee shop that I go to, the gym that I work out in, the hobbies that I have. If everything about my life was giving worship to the one who created me and experiencing the joy of revealing him in everything that I do, just like that first breath, what would it look like? And I want you just to think about that in your life for just a minute. What would it look like if the beauty and the depth of the truth of Jesus was a reality in my identity? Maybe in a lot of ways it would look the same. But what would it look like when you got up and went to work? What would it look like when you went to school? What would it look like if these things were entrenched in your very soul, if you were living in the joy that you have in Jesus in everything that you do? Now, maybe this morning you're here, and I know that we have every single week between the 9 o'clock, the 11 o'clock, and the 10 o'clock service at Salem Park, there are people who come into this place that are seekers. They're wondering if Jesus is the reality, and they're seeking Jesus just like they seek everything else in the world. And maybe this is a little bit of hope and a little bit of a glimpse of where they need to turn. And they're here maybe with doubts, or maybe you're a follower of Jesus, but you have doubts. And I just want to say, I'm glad that you're here. And you're in the right place. And my prayer for you this morning is that you would take that doubt, and what we often say doubt is, or seeking is, it's like a poised foot. It's something that we can either step forward in and lean into and find answers for the things and the questions of our hearts and our minds, and grow closer to the truth and the reality that we are made for and created for, and the joy that we long for, and the satisfaction that we desire. Or we can step backwards away from everything that we were created to know. And so this morning, if it's you're seeking, you're not a follower of Jesus, you're doubting, my prayer for you, my challenge to you is that you would actually just step forward and lean in, have an open heart and mind to the things that Jesus might say to you this morning. That you would be open to the truth of that reality. But if you are a follower of Jesus, I want you to just reflect for just a moment on that question. What would it look like in your life? What would it look like in the church's life if who we are in Jesus affected everything that we do? What would it look like? What would it look like when our decision making and our priorities and our passions, the way that we love, that we actually begin to love people in our community and our neighbors, and in a way that's revealing the love that we have in Jesus and not using them to get something from them that we don't already have? What would our forgiveness look like? What would our passion, our serving look like, our work look like? Just begin to reflect on these different things and just be honest with yourself this morning. Does my life look like what I desire it to be and what I know to be true of the gospel truth? And my guess would be that what we're thinking about, this is what it would look like in everything that I do if I really, really believe this and it was connecting and I was living in that joy. It might be a little bit different than what our days actually look like. Mine too. And that's what I've been struggling with this morning. And so when we look at this text, this is not to call us out, because when we read this text, we're going to immediately know what this is about. This is about the calling that God puts on the life of the believer. It's about the mission that he gives us, the purpose that we are able to live in our new identity that actually brings joy and is intertwined with everything that we long for. But I don't want us to feel called out this morning. My prayer is that this would inspire us, that this would challenge us to actually walk in and see it as an opportunity to rest in the realities of Jesus. to have a peace that surpasses all understanding, to understand who we are in beautiful, beautiful ways. Because there is a reality, and that is, as we're thinking about how it would affect my work and we're thinking about how it would affect my relationships, there's also something that God does call us to, a mission that he does call us to, that is intertwined with our joy, as we'll see in our text this morning. And so I also want to pose the question to you, if the depths of who we are in Jesus was affecting everything that you do, how would it affect the way that you interact with people who don't know him? How would it look different in our interaction with people who don't know him? And as I was thinking of this week about the triad, there's about 1.7 million people in the triad. A recent study shows that about 25% and dropping actually have a meaningful relationship with Jesus and a church body. So that's 1,275,000 people in the triad that don't know Jesus. If we hone in just a little bit closer, it's 190,000 people that don't know Jesus that right now are fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, friends, coworkers, classmates, that in this very moment are just a few miles from us. How would an understanding of the gospel affect the way that we see people who don't know the life that we experience in Jesus? Faces that we see every single day, that we have an opportunity to interact with and an opportunity to reveal with our proclamation of the truth and with our action of displaying the truth, the everlasting hope and unconditional love and amazing grace and unmerited mercy and elusive justice and untouchable joy and unimaginable peace and unknown forgiveness and the true meaning of why they exist. And my guess would be that every single one of us who knows Jesus in this room, we want him to affect everything about our life. We know that he is where joy is and peace is and comfort is and reality and purpose and meaning. And we want the people around us to know that as well. We want to be revealers of truth and not seekers of things that we know we can only have in Jesus. So we want to be on mission. It is what God has called us to. It is where the awe of life it is. It is what makes life amazing. To actually live out the way that God has called us to live out. That is what makes life good. And so if you're missing something this morning, you're like thinking to yourself, man, I spend time with God, I'm in his word, I'm in prayer, I have other believers that I get with, but it doesn't seem to be connecting in my life. Maybe it's because we're not living in the purpose that we're here. We're not revealing him in everything that we do. And this morning, as we look into this text, I want us to think about revealing Jesus in a deeper way than maybe we just kind of typically think of him when we go on mission trips. We've gone on several mission trips in the last couple of months to the Dominican Republic and Honduras. And the thing about it is when you go on a mission trip, many of you have probably been, you're kind of in a new place and you're kind of discovering different cultural things. And by the end of the week, though, you just realize that God is up to something powerful all around the world. I've seen miracles happen on the mission field. I've seen demon possession, people be freed of it. I've seen dreams that people have had and then people coming into their life and being able to explain them with the gospel truth. I've seen incredible, miraculous, supernatural things on the mission field. And every single time I go, it doesn't matter if it was the first time or the 25th time that I go somewhere where God is revealing himself in a powerful way, he opens my eyes to the fact that there's something greater than my personal opinion happening. There's something greater than my culture that is happening, that he is powerful and loving and we can trust him and he is working and moving and saving all over the world. And it does something in me when I get back. It's like, man, this is how I should always be living. I was talking to somebody who went on the Dominican Republic trip with us, Keith Thrasher. He goes to our Salem Park campus. I don't think you would care if I mention his name, but over there they call him Keith Trasher because apparently the TH is just as hard for me to roll my R's. And so Keith Trasher, and he was talking to me when we got back, and he was like, man, it just feels like I shouldn't have left. And that I need to live that way here. And we get that feeling when we go and see God working around the world. But there's something about the familiarity of the life that we just live, of just waking up and going to work and doing the things. And it just pulls us away from the impact we know that the gospel is supposed to have on us and the impact we desire for the gospel to have. For us to live in our true identity, to have the wonder of the gospel truth just color everything in our lives. And I want us to restore the wonder this morning. As Jesus is sending out the disciples for the very first time without him, to this point, the disciples have pretty much just been spectators. They're walking around with Jesus. They've got just as many questions as everybody else. They're watching Jesus speak with authority. They're watching him perform miracles. They're hearing everything that he has come to do. And they've got just as many questions as everybody else. They're just spectating. But now Jesus is going to send them out. And maybe we too, for the vast majority of our lives, maybe we've grown up in church, maybe we have experienced him, maybe we have a lot of knowledge about him, but we've pretty much just been spectators of everything that he wants to do in and through us. And so as Jesus is sending out the disciples, we need to know that he has also sent us out. It's what we call the Great Commission, that we are to go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And this is what he has called us to as his followers. This is what he invites us into. But I also know that as soon as we hear that, then we start thinking to ourselves, man, to be missional, so to speak, or to be a witness or to evangelize, like it just feels so weird and it just feels gross and it feels awkward. And I don't even know what that looks like. It almost feels like if I were to leave this place and bear witness of who Jesus is, I've had so many awkward experiences. And if you are actually interacting with unbelievers outside of just walking up to them and telling them something about Jesus, then you would know how they see that when it takes place in our culture and the feeling that it gives them. And so you almost feel like it's more life-taking for me than life-giving for me, and it almost does more damage for them in the world who don't know Jesus than it does invite them into something that is life-giving. So what should this actually look like in our daily lives? And this is the beauty of what Jesus gives us in this text. How does the gospel affect our everyday life? How do we actually reveal him in everything that we do in a way that's natural, where mission is a lifestyle and not a program? And we're going to see some principles that Jesus lays out here that are for every time, every person, every place, and every culture. So as we read this, it's not going to directly correlate. And you're going to immediately understand that and know that. There's no way you're going to think we could just do this. And I think there is a place for it, and we'll talk about that. But there's principles here that should affect our everyday life. So look with me, Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 7. And he, talking about Jesus, called the 12 and began to send them out two by two. See if you can pick up principles. And he gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He charged them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on two tunics, which sounds weird, but great theological point there. And he said to them, whenever you enter a house, stay there until you depart from there. And if any place will not receive you and they will not listen to you, when you leave, shake the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out proclaiming that people should repent. They go out preaching the gospel truth. And they cast out many demons, anointed with oil many who were sick, and healed them. So Jesus has been revealing himself. The disciples have been witnessing this. He has been teaching with authority as though he is the source of the truth. He has been demonstrating his authority by performing miraculous and supernatural things and healings. Last week, we saw how even though the disciples were witnessing all of that, and they were witnessing how we're not really sure how Jesus is going to be the king and bring about this kingdom that we expect him to, but we're pretty sure things are going pretty well at this point. And then Jesus puts on display, as we saw last week, that there is an offense to the gospel that needs to be weighed, and we need to count the cost before he actually sends us or the disciples out. And we saw just really quickly how that offense of the gospel is something that we need to feel, but listen to me, it's not something that we need to take offense of. That would keep us from actually being able to surrender. We do need to count the cost. Because the gospel truth of who Jesus is, it is offensive. It is offensive to the religious person. Because Jesus is not the God that we would create on our own. And this is something incredibly important that we need to understand about the Bible. Any other religion, any other philosophy of life, anywhere where we create our own God, we are able to see patterns of a God that we would create. A God that humanity would develop. And in so doing, we create these gods and these religions where a God we would see would come down and they would determine that we have to do something incredibly impressive. We have to follow some unbelievable type of laws and rules to be able to get ourselves up to him in hopes that he would bless us, that he would show mercy to us, that he would save us. And the reason that we create gods that way is because we want to, even in our creation of a God, have some sort of control over the God we would create. If I do these things, if I work in this way, if I accomplish all of this, then I want in some way to have something over God. I want him to owe me. I want to feel like I can have some sort of self-righteousness, some way of understanding where I am on the ladder of righteousness and goodness so that I can look to my left and my right and see how other people are doing it, what this God has declared that we should do. And then if I'm doing better, I can feel like God would owe me something. This is how religion works. It's a God that we would create. Jesus, on the other hand, is not a God that we would ever create, that we would ever imagine, because he comes outside of our culture, outside of our time, outside of our own opinions and culture, and he actually reveals the kingdom that we were created to know and understand and live in and have community with him as king, but walked away and rebelled from, and gives us the understanding there's nothing that we can do to earn him. There's nothing that we can do to make ourselves way to him, that he alone could come down and live on our behalf perfectly as we were created to know him and be in community with him, that he alone could pay the penalty in his perfection and holiness for our sin, and that he alone, because he is sinless, cannot be defeated by death, but rises from the dead because death comes from our sin and rebellion. And when he rises, by his grace through his work, we might place our faith in him to have new life, restored community with him, and to have the sure hope of him returning and making all things new, and how it affects us in reality for a joy that cannot be touched and a peace that surpasses all understanding in the life that we live today. But that is absolutely offensive to the one who's trying to earn their own way. It's also offensive to the irreligious, because the irreligious on the other side of that are thinking to themselves, well, I should be able to determine with my own passions and desires what I want to do in the immediate and how I want to find joy in the moment and in every circumstance. And by following my own heart, I should be able to somehow just gain some sort of traction towards everything that I am seeking. When Jesus comes in, he completely levels the playing field. Says, no, you cannot find salvation or everything that you were created to know and that you are seeking in and of yourself, and you cannot find it in what you do. But the religious person needs Jesus just as much as the irreligious, and the irreligious person needs Jesus just as much as the religious person. That we cannot have salvation in anything other than him and his work for us on our behalf. But this is offensive to us. And so the irreligious and the religious are offended. And this is something that, listen to me, it should offend. We should feel that offense. Because in our very natures, we are either going at it with our own passions and desires to get what we were created to have in God, or we are going at it to try to earn what we were created to have in our relationship with God. And when Jesus comes and says, no, it is only by me that you can be saved, then he tells the religious person that you can't work really hard and get to me. And the irreligious person, you can't find your own way and get to me. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and it is only by grace that you are saved. And so we have to feel that offense. We have to count the cost. And we shouldn't feel offense towards it unless we reject it and we don't surrender to it, but we do need to count the cost. So the disciples have seen all of this, and they've experienced Jesus and the offense of the gospel, and they have been watching everything that Jesus is doing. And so now it says that Jesus calls the 12. He's calling them, and then he is sending them out. So he calls them, he calls them unto himself. He reveals that he is the way, the truth, and the life, that he is salvation, that only through him might we have freedom from the things of the world, to live in the way that we were created to live, to understand who we actually are and what we were actually created to do. And then he sends them out. That word sent out is where we get our word mission or missionary. Missionary just means a sent one. It's someone who represents Jesus. And in some way, this is not an optional thing. Every single one of us, and I want us to understand this, every single one of us, whether you believe in Jesus or you don't believe in Jesus, you are a missionary. You are a worshiper by nature. And every single one of us is worshiping something in our lives that we believe will somehow give us what we are seeking. And then when we find and grab hold of something and worship something that we feel like is giving us some form of joy, then we will be revealers of that thing. Now, if it's not Jesus, then you're worshiping things of creation and you're pursuing a joy that is not everlasting, but you are revealing it. You're just revealing it to try to gain something that you don't have, to try to get other people to join in, to kind of bolster what you believe in, to get a little bit more joy out of it as other people are believing in it as well. But if you're following Jesus and you're worshiping him, then you are satisfied in him. You have everything that you were created to have and to know, to have the joy that you long for and are seeking. And he has accomplished everything for you so that the hard work of Christianity is really leaning into who you already are in him when you place your faith in him, not becoming something that you are not. And then your mission, or you're being sent out to reveal everything that you are positionally in him. And then that actually allows you to have joy in that, in the revealing, rather than seeking what you do not have. But every single one of us are missional people. We're revealing something, and we want people to understand the joy that we get from it. This is just what we were created. It's because we were created in the image of God. He reveals himself. We desire to do this too. It's not optional. And if you are a follower of Christ, then we desire innately, is why when I ask the questions at the very beginning of our time together, every single one of us, whether we're doing it or not, if we know the reality of Jesus Christ and what he's done, we do want people to understand that. We want people to come to Jesus. There's a reason that when somebody places their faith in him, it brings us to tears. There's a reason that it's the most joyful thing we've ever experienced. We want people to know the joy that we have, whether we're participating in it or not. Because the character of God is to reveal himself, and naturally, when he gives us the identity we were created to have in him, we want to pour that out. We want to reveal our true selves. We want to reveal our identity to others. With him as the king and his kingdom is everything. This is the greatest mission on planet Earth. It's why you were made. To glorify God and reveal him in everything that you do. And so to reveal him in our places of work and where we live and in our neighborhoods, this is the greatest joy. It's the greatest mission. It's the thing that's greater and bigger than us, to reveal and give glory to God in everything we are and in everything that we do. And so Jesus is sending them out for the first time without him. Now, as I said, everything doesn't perfectly match up with our culture and our day and our time. We have to contextualize some of the things here, but there are some principles. And one question that I think of immediately when I think of just the desire to see people come to faith, and then also I think of the vast number of people who don't know him, then I think, man, how do I actually live as a sent believer, proclaiming the truth and revealing the truth in a way that's impactful? How do I do this in my everyday life? How is this just who I am? How is it not just like a program, or how is it a revealing of my identity? And I think that Jesus lays out some things in this text, and there's a passage in Luke chapter 10 where Jesus sends out the 72 in the exact same way and gives a little bit more detail. But I think Jesus gives us some principles here as to how we can practically begin to live our lives as revealers of who we are in Jesus. And that's what I want us just to go through quickly this morning. And so the first thing that he says is that he is sending out the 12 disciples, And we begin to see how he sends them out into places, and this is around Galilee. And so these are to Jewish people primarily. And he wants to send them out, and here's the first thing that he does. He sends them out 2 by 2. So what is the first practical way that we begin to live on mission as God has placed in our heart, as he is calling us to do, to reveal him in everything, to have joy in giving him worship? Well, the first principle that he points out is that Christianity is not something that we do individually. It's a salvation that comes to us individually. Each one of us must place our faith in him. We are saved individually in his work for us, but then he saves us into something. Into a family, into a community. We see this all throughout the New Testament and in the early church. Just a few examples in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 8, Peter and John are sent out together. In Acts chapter 11, Barnabas and Paul are sent out together. In Acts chapter 15, when Paul and Barnabas have a little bit of a rift and they come together later, but they separate for a time, Barnabas takes Mark with him and Paul takes Silas with him. This is also something that's tied to the Old Testament. The Old Testament law, you would need 2 or more people to bear witness to a truth. And so this is where we also get this idea of Jesus telling us where 2 or more are gathered. He is present. And he's talking about us holding one another accountable in the text where he says that, but it certainly applies when 2 believers are together. There is power. It represents a community that we have with God. It represents something he has called us into, and he reveals himself in special ways when community is happening centered around him. But you can also get this picture as these 2 are sent to these different places, that as they go 2 by 2, they're actually bearing witness. And everybody who is of the Jewish tradition and faith, when they see 2 coming, then one would be bearing witness to what the other is saying about who Jesus is and what he's done. And certainly they've heard this already. So these 2 people are walking in line with Old Testament law, that 2 people would bear witness to Jesus. But we also get this deep reality that to walk in what God has called us to walk in the joy of our identity in him, that ministry is shared. Community with one another puts on display community with God. It also just allows us some practical things, and we could talk about this for a very long time this morning, but just a couple. It allows us to know one another. We often say you can only be loved to the extent that you are known. The goal of life outside of relationship with Jesus, where we can be fully known in him and fully loved in him, that he loves us to the extent that there's nothing that we could do to make him love us more, and there's nothing we could do to make him love us less, allows us to be completely open, completely bare, completely honest, forgiven of our brokenness and sin, and made whole in his righteousness and his work by his grace. That allows us then to have deep community with one another because we find our satisfaction in Jesus, our joy and meaning and purpose and identity in him, and not what others think of us or how others receive us. And when we both understand that that is the reality we have in Jesus, then we can begin to be open with one another, know one another, and actually begin to love one another. But the way that we do community in the world is we have to hide certain things and project certain things so that we can get back from the person we're trying to have community with and we say that we love, certain things that we need to fulfill us, to give us something that we do not have. You will never be able to be completely open and honest with someone unless they are completely surrendered to Christ and know that love and affection and purpose and community and acceptance doesn't come from living up to a certain standard, but Jesus living up to the standard for us, and by grace we have salvation in him. But we are able to, in him, have this deep community where I can know you and you can know me. We can pray for one another's struggles. We can hold one another accountable. We just passed the new year, and a study just came out that revealed something about New Year's resolutions and goals. And what it basically said is, if you make a goal, you just set a goal, you have about a 10% chance of actually achieving that goal. You just make it. You just say it on January 1st. then you have about a 40 to 45% chance of completing that goal if you make a plan with it. So I made a goal, I made a plan, 45% chance I'll accomplish it. But if you make a goal, make a plan, and then you also set a time limit or a time on it, then it goes up 50 to 55%. So not a huge jump, but you need these three things to at least get halfway to a certainty that you can probably achieve your goal. But if you have accountability towards that goal, with that plan, with that time limit, you have a 95% chance of accomplishing that goal. What community actually allows us to do, centered around Christ, is to be open to one another, hold one another accountable, and we have a far greater chance in community to be able to walk towards who we are in Christ, to be able to practice the identity that we have in Him, to be able to experience the joy in everything that we were created to know and experience in Him, and to reveal Him to those who do not know Him when we are in deep community. We have accountability. We're able to pray for one another. We're able to pray for the people that I am praying for. If you know me and who I'm praying for, you're able to pray for them. You're able to ask about them. You're able to carry the burden of the desire that we have for different people to know the joy that only comes in Jesus. So community allows us accountability. It allows us to pray. Community, we know, and I see this all the time, it helps us get out of something that has happened in our life. And you guys know who that is. You've all experienced this. When something really drastic happens in your life, people will often run to the church for help because they know that community that they find in the church can help them get out of a hole. But then they come in, they want to microwave this type of community, and they're trying to get everybody to help them. And it's really hard not to just think that they're only coming around and want you to be their friend when they need help. But community also keeps us out of the hole. And this is a really powerful truth that all of us need to understand. We're called to engage with the body of Christ, but when you do, it actually keeps you in the way that you're supposed to be walking with Christ, and it keeps you out of falling into different traps. It keeps you out of the things that you often come in needing to be saved out of. So it actually allows you to walk in the truth of who you are in Christ in a deeper way, and it gives you less anxiety, less fear, less trouble, less falling away from the life that you know you have in Jesus and desire to live and walk in. Community is huge for us, and Jesus actually tells us in John chapter 17 that when we walk in life in community centered around Him, that the love that we have for one another will actually reveal to the world outside that He is who He says He is. That this is the greatest example that He is God in the way that we love one another in a way that looks supernatural to the world who hasn't experienced the community that you can have only in Jesus. So community is the way that God says, first, I want you to go together. You do not do this individually. Now, I know that doesn't mean every single time you go to work every morning, you need to call somebody up from your gospel-centered community and have them come to work with you. You don't have to take turns going to one another's work, right? You don't have to always have somebody with you at the gym or at the coffee shop or whatever it is. But what it does mean is, as I'm living missionally, I always have someone that I can go back to, I can report to, they are praying for me, and I'm going to walk through with them everything I'm experiencing singularly at work or at the coffee shop. I always have community. I'm never alone. This is a way that God has called us to live, to engage with one another. The second principle that we see in this text is that we need to lean into God for understanding, and that it is His power that people come to faith through. That it's His power that is working in and through us to bear witness to who He is. That He empowers us. This is so freeing. He empowers us to do everything that He has called us to do. And when we begin to lean into this, then we can begin to lose fear Because it's not up to what I say, it's not up to what I do that is going to reveal God or bring anybody to God, but it is his power. I am making myself available. The deeper I am in community, the more centered I am around his word, the deeper I am in prayer, the more understanding I'm going to have, the more discernment I'm going to have, the more I'm going to be able to understand what people are going through and the answers that they need to hear and how to reveal Jesus to them. But I don't have to worry about impressing them or convincing them. It is the power of God in and through me that reveals himself, and he alone has the power to save. Be in deep community and then understand that it is through his power that he moves and that he saves and that he draws people unto himself. This is what we need to begin to understand. Secondly, to be able to walk in him missionally as sent ones, as a lifestyle and not a program. We can trust that he is all-powerful, as we have seen in the book of Mark, that he loves us and he is with us, as we have seen in the book of Mark, and that we can trust him. And he says that when he sends us out, he sends us out with his power. This is a beautiful, beautiful truth that we need to understand. Now, when I mention this, I know that for many of us, I need to go through this really quickly, but I know for many of us, as soon as it says he sent them out with power to perform miracles and cast out demons, then we just quickly want to go to this idea of, well, why doesn't God do as many miracles today as he did then? Or why don't we see that in our culture like they saw it in the first century? And so just really quickly, I want to address that. I think that God is giving us the power, ultimately. We still do see miracles, and we still do see him relieving people of demonic spirits and demonic powers and all of those different kinds of things. But I think he's actually getting to something deeper here that the disciples are actually just revealing through his power. But I'll address it really quickly. So one of the reasons that we don't notice, and I'm going to use that word very specifically, we don't notice the miraculous and supernatural happening around us as much as we think we see in Scripture, is one, has a lot to do with our culture. Even if we see the supernatural, we deny it. We're just a people who are not looking for it. We don't believe it. We try to do anything we can to explain it away. So that's one of the reasons. But to put things in perspective, I love how John Piper puts it. He said this when answering this question. He said, there are fewer miracles mentioned and happening in the Bible than you probably think. And there are more miracles happening today than you probably know. See, we think of miraculous things after miraculous things happening in the Bible, but even all throughout Scripture, we see people in the New Testament and the Old Testament reminding themselves and remembering and going to God in prayer of remembrance and asking God to help them remember how he has moved in power in the past. Even the psalmist in Psalm 77, verse 11, he says, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. See, all throughout Scripture, you'll see people going to God, asking for him to help them remember, or them telling the people to remember how God moved in the past. Jesus even reminds us in this text of the Exodus, we'll see in just a moment. He's constantly reminding of things. He's telling people to put up stones of remembrance so that they remember how he is working in power. And so when we read Scripture, we think, man, it's just miraculous thing after miraculous thing. But here's what we need to know. Jesus only went to a few, relatively few towns and cities and did miraculous things when he was on earth. We see 3 people risen from the dead. We see in the New Testament, even after the apostles and the early church, historically, relatively few miraculous things happening. It wasn't ever happening to the extent of when Jesus was going into every town, because Jesus was revealing his power and his truth with the miraculous supernatural acts. And the teaching was the central truth of what he wanted everybody to understand. And he was just revealing who he actually is with the miraculous acts. Now we actually look back at what he did and how he came and his death and his resurrection. And the teaching is what saves us. His truth is what we need to draw close to. None of us place our faith in Jesus because of his miraculous works. Faith is not a tool to get God to do stuff. Faith is a surrendering and an understanding that he is God and that he is everything that we need. So what we see all throughout Jesus' life is that his teaching is actually central, not the miraculous works. And that he does this only to reveal who he is. He does this through the disciples to reveal that even when he goes back into his rightful place and he sits on his throne over all things, that he still reigns and rules and he is still active in the lives of his people and his church. That he is the same God yesterday, today, and forevermore. And so he does not need to perform miracles to reveal who he is. He is God, and we should not believe in him because of a lack of supernatural or because of the supernatural, but because of who he is. And the truth is that he is still doing miraculous works today all around us. And my guess is that if we were able to get all of the stories from missionaries, the miraculous things that he's doing, all of the stories from doctors that cannot explain to you why something happened in someone's life, and we put all of those into a book and we began to read them, we would be absolutely stunned. We would think that we are living in a world of miracles, because we are. But we're not called to believe in Jesus because of that, but because of who he is. He's revealing himself through them. So he says, I'm calling you to walk in community. I'm calling you to lean on my power because I will give you the power. I will give you the words. I will be the one that draws. I'm calling you, I'm sending you to reveal who I am and who I've made you to be, just to be the true identity and to reveal that to everybody that you know, everywhere that you are, and I will work through you. Then he says, and we'll do the last two really quickly, then he says the third principle, travel light. Now, I love this, and it ties in with the second one, but the third principle is travel light. He gives this whole list of things that he doesn't want them to take. He's taking this directly out of the Exodus story. This is what he tells the Israelite people to do when he frees them out of Egypt. He tells them not to take a whole lot of things, and essentially what we see there, along with him telling them to take only one tunic, what you would do in the first century is travel with two tunics because you would wear one, and then if you had to sleep outside at night, you would cover up with one. And so Jesus is saying, don't take a lot. Don't take more than one tunic because you're not going to have to sleep outside. I'm going to provide for you is what Jesus is saying. I will provide everything that you need. I will speak through you in power. I will give you community, and everything that you need, I will provide for you to do what I have called you to do. You do not have to worry. I am in control, and I will provide. But theologically, he's also pointing to the Exodus, and there's something really cool that he's saying here. Because he tells them to be sent out the same way he brought out the Israelites from Egypt. Then even 12 disciples would be really ringing something of remembrance in the Jewish people's minds, because there were 12 tribes in the Israelite people. And these 12 tribes were supposed to be revealing God to the world around them and showing and revealing what a kingdom of God would look like on earth as it is in heaven. But they continued to fall and come back and fall and come back. And what Jesus is doing here is almost giving us this picture of him sending out the disciples through his power in community as a new people, a free people to reveal their identity, a new nation of God's people that come to him through faith. He tells them to take a staff, and the staff would remind people of Moses standing over the Red Sea and parting it. See, everything that Jesus is saying, he's giving this image of this new people that he is sending out that are come to him through faith because of who he is and what he has done. He's restoring all of the old, all of what we were created to know at the very beginning, and why we were created and what we were created to live in. And he is the fulfillment, he says, of the Old Testament, even in the way he is sending out the disciples, and he sends us out today. And you can depend on him. He will give you everything that you need to fulfill the calling that he has put on your life right where you are. And I need you to know that wherever you are, wherever you live, whatever you're doing, whatever job you have, whoever you're coming into contact, whatever hobbies you enjoy, that's where God's sending you. Some of you, he'll lay on your heart that you're being sent to the uttermost parts of the earth. And if he is, we support that, and we want to encourage that, and we want to send you, and we want to provide for you. But if he's not, then he's calling you to be a teacher at the school you're at. He's calling you to the coffee shop because he placed the enjoyment of coffee on your life. He's calling you to the gym because you want to be healthy and you want to do, and so you need to become and begin to look at yourself as though you are sent to those places, and there are people all around you that are desperately seeking Jesus, whether they know it or not. And you need to begin to just love them and care for them. And you might say, well, how do I do that? How do I kind of become, so to speak, like the pastor of my gym or the pastor of my coffee shop without it being weird and just, I'm not going to stand up on a coffee table and just start preaching to everybody. So what does this actually look like? And that brings us to principle number 4. This is what Jesus tells us to do. He tells them to stay in the same place. He just gets extremely practical. He says, if somebody's hospitable towards you, then stay with them. And in this culture in the first century, this would be really common. Like if you go to some places, like when we were in the Dominican Republic a couple months ago, if you go to somebody's house and you just start, they're going to immediately invite you in. Like I'm pretty convinced they would just allow you to live with them if you wanted to. It's just, they're very hospitable because it's an honor towards you, and it's also an honor on their family to be hospitable. And so they just are. And in the first century, this wouldn't be uncommon if you came into a new place. And in fact, in the Jewish laws and the Didache, right after Jesus' life and in the first century, it was kind of the first constitution of the church, so these Jewish rules and laws. There are 16 chapters. 3 of them are devoted to hospitality. That if somebody comes to your house and they're teaching and they say they have something to share with you, that you should invite them in. So this was commonplace in the first century culture amongst the Jewish people. But for us, this is not commonplace. It's weird. We all know if somebody comes and knocks on your door and you look outside and you don't know them, you don't want to talk, you don't want to invite them in, you are suspicious of everyone, right? And that's just generally in our culture. Maybe you're not like that. Fantastic for you. Be careful. Because we just live in a different world and in a different culture. But there is a way that we can be hospitable towards others in our everyday things of life and recognize people who are being hospitable with us and then just be intentional with them. This is critical if we're going to walk in a missional lifestyle that is genuine and true, and we're going to see people that we have relationship with come to faith as we desire them to, rather than feeling like it's programmatic and disingenuine. This is what God is calling us to. What he tells them to do is something, it's a principle really that missionaries have taken for centuries as they get trained to go overseas. And what they're trained to do is to go into new cultures and look for people of peace. Look for people who are hospitable towards you. And so as you are hospitable and you walk into your coffee shop or you go into your gym or you go to your workplace and you're being kind and you're being loving and you're trying to work in such a way that it elevates everyone else's work, and you're working out in such a way that you're there to support everybody else, and you're going to a coffee shop in such a way where you're being kind and open and somebody else can actually sit at the chair that's across from you because you're open to them, and you're being nice to the baristas and all of those different kinds of things, here's what you need to do to be missional. You need to recognize who's being hospitable. Who is leaning into me as I lean into them? Who is getting to know me as I'm trying to get to know them? See, the life of being sent and living missional is not so much doing something outside of where God has you and what he's called you to and what you're doing in your daily rhythms and routines. It's more so being intentional in your daily routines. If I love coffee, I'm going to go to the same coffee shop at the same time because I know other people are going to do that as well, and I'm going to be able to build community and relationship with these people. It's that kind of thing. It's being intentional with what God has already birthed in you, given you desire for, where he already has you in your neighborhoods and in your workplaces. This is what gives you a missional lifestyle. Who's leaning in? As people are getting to know my identity is in Jesus. So I am proclaiming as I get to know people who I am and what gives me life. I'm not hiding that from anybody. And then I'm also revealing the love that I've experienced through Christ in the way that I serve them, in the way that I care for them, in the way that I want to pray for them, in the way that I'm helpful towards them. So as they get to know me, they're getting to know the Christ that gives me my identity. And as they lean in, I'm leaning in. I'm investing. I'm sharing truth with them. I'm praying for them. I'm sharing that I'm praying for them with my community. Now my community is praying for them. This is how, as a people of God, we begin to see a movement of God in our community with people he has already placed right next to us that are close from us but far from him. These are the things that he is calling us to do, and these are the principles that we see right here in this text. And the final thing he says is, there will be, if we do this, many people who give their life to Christ. And we will be able to celebrate that, and it will be incredible, and we will see a movement of the gospel in the people that we know. But there will also be people who reject. And what Jesus says here is, if they reject, there's a theological and a practical, and we'll close with this, to what's actually happening here. He says to dust the dirt off of your feet if they reject you. And what he's really saying here, theologically, is if in the first century, if you were walking out of Jerusalem or Jerusalem territory as a Israelite person, and you went to do business, say, in a Gentile territory, when you came back into Jerusalem territory, the rabbis would have you dust the dirt off of your feet because they didn't want you to bring pagan soil into a holy place. And what you're saying is this place is sacred. This space is holy. And what Jesus is saying is, as you go to Israelite territory and you share the gospel truth of Jesus and call people to repentance, and they do not repent, then we need to put on display for them that the only way of salvation is through faith, not your religion, not where you are from, not your race, not your language, nothing but putting your faith in Jesus will save you. This is the reality that he is putting on display for the Jewish people that the disciples are going to. And we need to be a people who, even when there is rejection, are able to, in love, demonstrate that we love you and Jesus is the only way of salvation. That we're not bending to our culture, we're not bending to opinion, but we continue to love. That means we're not obnoxious with people. We are not giving people reason to hate the word of Jesus or to hate the gospel truth in the way that we act or the things that we say. We should not be the stumbling block. Jesus is empowering us to proclaim his truth in love. Both of those need to be together. I know that some of you will be really just more natural in the proclamation part, and you're the ones that tend to be kind of a little more obnoxious and calling people out and doing different kinds of things and I'm just sharing the truth, man, right? And you're just going to hit people upside the head with the Bible. Like, some of us just have that tendency. Then some of us are going to be more on the tendency side of just love and just care, and we're never going to actually get to the truth. Listen to me, both of those are a false sense of renewal. If the person believes what you are saying, but you are not loving them, then you are just giving them knowledge, and they will not grasp the beauty of the gospel in a transforming way. But if all you are doing is serving them, then you are bringing a justice in their life that has no foundation, and it too will come to pass. So you need proclamation and love, and this is what people need to see. And it's not saying that if somebody rejects, that you just leave them and never talk to them again. There will be plenty of people that lean into you, and you need to give them attention. You need to give them time. There will be others in your life that are rejecting. You need to pray for them, and your community needs to pray for them. And we pray that God opens their heart and draws them into him. But we must be a people who reveal Christ in both proclamation and truth. He says, call them to repentance. For this is the only way of salvation, faith in Jesus Christ. This is what we are called to do, and I wish that we had so much more time to flesh this out, but this gives us some things to begin to build on. How can life be missional?